Every day we are bombarded with challenges, distractions, and disappointments. But what if I told you the real enemy is not the problem, but your perspective? You see, problems are loud, but God's power is louder if you choose to hear it. The enemy wants your attention because your attention feeds what grows in your life. The moment you shift your focus from fear to faith, from worry to the word, the power of God begins to break through. So let me ask you, what are you really focusing on? Stop magnifying your problems. Start glorifying God's power. That's the shift. That's the turning point. That's where everything changes. Because here's the truth. Whatever you magnify becomes your reality. Whatever you focus on multiplies. And too many people today are living in defeat, not because the problem is too big, but because their perspective is too small. You ever looked at something through a magnifying glass? It doesn't change the size of the object. It just changes how you see it. And that's exactly what the enemy wants. He wants you to keep staring at your challenges through a magnifying glass. He wants you to obsess over what's going wrong instead of stepping back and remembering who's really in control. He wants you to spend all your energy studying the storm instead of speaking to it. And here's where many people get stuck. They keep praying about the problem, but never start praising through the problem. Why? Because they've made the problem bigger than the power. They've placed more faith in the issue than in the God who can fix it. But hear me, God is not intimidated by your situation. He's not sitting in heaven panicking about what's happening in your life. He's not caught off guard. He's not pacing back and forth. He's not wondering what to do next. No, he's already made a way. But you'll never see it if all you're doing is magnifying the mountain. You know what the word says? Oh, magnify the Lord with me. It doesn't say magnify the pain. It doesn't say magnify the bank account. It doesn't say magnify the betrayal, the loss, the delay, or the diagnosis. It says magnify the Lord. Why? Because when you magnify the Lord, everything else begins to shrink in comparison. When your eyes are locked on His power, the size of the problem becomes irrelevant. When your faith is fixed on who He is, not just what you feel, Tian, the breakthrough begins. The problem isn't that God's not moving. It's that you're too focused on the wrong thing to see it. Don't let the noise of your struggle drown out the whisper of His strength. Don't let the size of the fire distract you from the one who walks in the fire with you. Shift your focus. Recalibrate your vision. Stop rehearsing the problem and start releasing praise. Because the moment you start glorifying God's power over your problems, that's when heaven starts invading your reality. That's when the impossible starts bowing down. That's when walls fall. That's when peace rises. That's when favor starts flowing. But the question is, if your focus can build fear, what could it build if it was redirected toward faith? Let's talk about that next, because the problem is not the issue. Your focus is. The problem is not the issue. Your focus is. Let that settle in for a moment. Because what you call the problem may not really be the root. What if the problem is not the financial lack, not the sickness, not the delay, not the betrayal, but your focus on it? You see, the enemy doesn't need to take everything from you. All he needs to do is shift your focus. If he can steal your focus, he can weaken your faith. Focus is powerful. Focus determines direction, and direction determines destination. If your focus is fixed on fear, anxiety, and confusion, your life will move in that direction. But when your focus is aligned with God's purpose, your path starts shifting toward power, peace, and clarity. What you're locked in on is shaping what you're walking in. That's why the enemy is after your attention. He doesn't mind you having potential. As long as you're too distracted to ever activate it, he doesn't mind you going to church as long as you leave still focused on what's wrong instead of what's right. He'll use a delay, a phone call, a text, a rumor, a moment, to get you off track, to get you emotional, to get you focused on the wrong thing. Let me ask you this. What has been dominating your mind lately? What's been renting space in your thoughts? What are you constantly rehearsing in your heart? Because whatever owns your attention owns your outcome. That's why God tells us, fix your eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Why? Because what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen, eternal, permanent, powerful. You can't walk in God's strength while staring at your weakness. You can't live in purpose while focusing on pressure. The reason some people never move forward is because they're too busy staring at what's behind them, living in the rearview mirror, trying to drive into destiny while focused on what already happened. But what if you lifted your eyes? What if you fixed your mind on what God is doing instead of what the enemy did? What would shift? You've got to train your mind to focus on God's promises, not your problems. Because what you focus on feeds you. It fuels your belief. It directs your attitude. It decides your expectation. And your expectation creates the atmosphere for God to move. So if your focus is off, your faith will be too. But if you can recalibrate your focus, if you can get your eyes back on Him, TN things start to change, not just around you, but within you. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, ask yourself, where's my focus? Because when you shift your focus, you activate something greater. But now, let me take you one step deeper, because God's power is present. Are you paying attention? God's power is present. Are you paying attention? See, the presence of power is never the issue. The issue is awareness. God's power doesn't come and go like your feelings. It's not seasonal. It's not moody. It doesn't depend on whether you feel spiritual today or not. It's constant. It's eternal. It's unshakable. But if you're not tuned into it, you can be standing in the middle of a miracle and miss it. Imagine sitting in a room full of light, but your eyes are closed. Is the light gone? No, you just can't see it. That's how many people are living, surrounded by divine power, but completely unaware, consumed by problems, distractions, offenses, fears, while heaven is standing by, waiting for just a little attention, a little awareness, a little faith. God is not far from you. He's not hiding. He's not withholding. His power is not on vacation. But the question is, are you positioned to perceive it? Because God doesn't force His power on you. He responds to hunger. He responds to faith. He moves where He's welcomed, where He's honored, where the focus shifts from the natural to the supernatural. The reason many people don't see God moving is because they've reduced Him to their logic. If it doesn't make sense, they dismiss it. If it doesn't fit their timeline, they give up on it. But faith isn't about logic, it's about vision. And vision comes from focus. You've got to look again. You've got to quiet the noise. You've got to tune in. God's power was there in the lion's den. God's power was there in the fiery furnace. God's power was there in the wilderness. And His power is here right now. But until you believe it, until you expect it, until you make room for it, you'll walk through life thinking heaven is silent, when in reality, your attention is just elsewhere. Let me say this, God's power doesn't respond to pity. It doesn't react to panic. It moves in alignment with faith. And faith is activated by what you choose to focus on. That's why you've got to look again. Pray with expectation, worship with authority, walk with confidence. Speak like He's already moving, because He is. So maybe the next breakthrough you're waiting for isn't waiting on God. Maybe it's waiting on you to wake up, to tune in, to focus again on the one who never left. Now here's the real challenge. What happens when your focus starts shaping your identity? What if what you look at is what you become? Let's talk about it, because what you focus on will master you. What you focus on will master you. That's not just a motivational line, it's a spiritual law. You become what you behold. You are shaped by what you stare at. You are molded by what you meditate on. And here's the truth. You don't even have to try to become it. Just focus on it long enough, and it will form your thoughts, your attitude, your identity, your faith, or your fear. This is why the enemy fights for your focus. He doesn't always come with horns and fire. He comes with distractions. Subtle, consistent, strategic. He'll send fear through a headline. He'll send offense through a comment. He'll stir doubt through delay, not to destroy you outright, but to control your attention. Because he knows if he can manage your focus, he can manipulate your future. Look at people who are always talking about what's wrong, always negative, always discouraged. It's not because their life is worse than everyone else's. It's because they've made their problems their focus. They've let the storm master them. They've allowed their failures to define them. And slowly, they stop believing, they stop dreaming, they stop fighting. But on the other hand, look at someone who's been through fire and still comes out praising. Look at someone who's endured loss, delay, betrayal, and still has a smile, still walks in peace, still speaks life. What's their secret? It's not that they don't have problems. It's that their focus is different. They've decided to let God's word master them instead of their worries. You can't be focused on failure and expect to walk in favor. You can't keep feeding on fear and expect to live in faith. You can't meditate on offense and expect peace to overflow. It doesn't work like that. Your life will always go in the direction of your dominant focus. The enemy is not just after your strength. He's after your source. And your source is revealed by what you consistently focus on. So if you keep focusing on pain, you'll live from it. If you keep focusing on fear, you'll be ruled by it. But if you choose daily to fix your mind on God's truth, to meditate on his promises, to align your thoughts with his plan, then that becomes your master. And what a difference that makes. Because when God's word becomes your focus, then peace becomes your atmosphere. Boldness becomes your nature. Power becomes your language. And victory becomes your expectation. But here's the next key. Once you shift your focus, you've got to move your response. Because God's power won't just respond to your emotions. It responds to your action. Let's go there, because now it's time to shift from panic to purpose. Shift from panic to purpose. You weren't designed to live in panic. You weren't built to function in fear. Panic is the language of the flesh, but purpose is the frequency of heaven. And the moment you begin to understand your purpose, fear begins to lose its grip. Panic dies in the presence of purpose. See, panic is a reaction, but purpose is a response. Panic says, I don't know what's going to happen. Purpose says, I know who's in control. Panic screams, it's too much. Purpose whispers, there's more in me than this moment. And right now, some of you have been living in panic mode, running from problem to problem, reacting to every wave, worrying about every shadow, when you should be standing in purpose, planted, rooted, and unmoved. You've got to stop letting your situation talk louder than your assignment. Your purpose didn't vanish just because pressure showed up. Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's over. Don't let panic rewrite the narrative God already finished. He declared the end from the beginning. That means what you're going through right now has already been factored into your purpose. Think about this. What if the storm you're panicking about is actually the platform God is preparing to launch you from? What if the fire isn't meant to burn you, but to forge you? Panic wants to run. Purpose wants to rise. And when you walk in purpose, you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start declaring, what is this creating in me? You are not here by accident. You are not facing this season by mistake. Purpose placed you here. Purpose sustained you. Purpose is what wakes you up in the morning and keeps you from quitting at night. But panic blinds you. It makes you forget who you are. It makes you forget what you carry. And it makes you hand over power to the very thing you were sent to conquer. So how do you shift from panic to purpose? You silence the noise and remember. Remember the promises. Remember the victories. Remember the word over your life. And then you act. Purpose is not passive. It doesn't wait for the weather to change. It doesn't wait for approval. It doesn't wait for clarity. It moves even in the unknown. Because when you walk in purpose, God meets you in motion. And He doesn't just bring peace. He brings power. Power to overcome. Power to rebuild. Power to break through. Now, here's the deeper level. If you want to truly walk in purpose, you've got to confront the biggest battle of all. Not just fear, not just panic, but the distraction that's keeping you from your power. Let's talk about it, because maybe the real issue is this. You're not weak, you're just distracted. You're not weak, you're just distracted. That's it. That's the truth the enemy doesn't want you to realize. He's not afraid of your strength. He's afraid of you remembering it. So what does he do? He distracts you. Not with bad things all the time. No, sometimes with things that look good, feel good, sound right, but aren't aligned with your assignment. Distraction is the most dangerous weapon hell uses on a focused believer. It doesn't break you. It drains you. It steals your clarity. It clouds your vision. It makes you question your calling. And then, before you even notice, you're tired, you're overwhelmed, you feel like giving up, not because you don't have the strength, but because your strength has been scattered across too many things that don't matter. You see, distraction is the slow death of destiny. It creeps in through comparison, through scrolling, through endless activity with no real purpose. You're running, but you're not going anywhere. You're doing, but you're not becoming. And that's how the enemy keeps you stuck, not with chains, but with choices that keep your eyes off the mission. Think about it. How many battles have you been fighting that God never told you to fight? How many doors are you knocking on that He never told you to walk through? How many people are you trying to please, impress, or fix when God called you to focus on Him? You're not out of strength. You're out of alignment. You're not defeated. You're just distracted. And the enemy knows a distracted believer can't access the full power of purpose. Because when your mind is everywhere, your faith is nowhere. When your attention is divided, your authority is weakened. You can't fight spiritual battles with scattered focus. But here's the shift. When you reclaim your focus, you reactivate your strength. When you say no to distractions, you say yes to destiny. When you choose to silence the noise, the still, small voice becomes clear again. That voice that reminds you who you are, why you're here, and what you were born to do. You're not here to chase everything. You're here to build something. You're not here to please the crowd. You're here to obey the call. And once you eliminate the distractions, you'll realize you've had the strength all along. But now, let me take you to a place even deeper, because if the enemy can't distract you, he'll try to weaken your belief. Let's talk about that next, because faith thrives where focus is clear. Faith thrives where focus is clear. That's the soil faith grows in, clarity. Not noise, not confusion, not emotional chaos, but clear, undivided focus on what God said. Faith doesn't need a perfect situation to work. It just needs a steady gaze, a locked-in heart, a spirit that refuses to be moved by what it sees and chooses instead to believe what it knows. You ever wonder why Jesus said, "According to your faith, be it unto you"? He didn't say according to your tears or according to your struggle or even according to your desperation. He said, according to your faith, because faith is the access point. Faith is what pulls the power of heaven into the reality of earth. But here's the key. Faith can't operate in a distracted atmosphere. It can't thrive when your focus is bouncing between doubt and belief every 5 minutes. If you want mountain-moving faith, you need laser focus. You need a heart that's locked in on the promise, not the problem. A mind that's rooted in truth, not tossed by feelings. Because when your focus is clear, your faith becomes dangerous, unshakable, bold, audacious. And that's the kind of faith that makes hell nervous. Look at Peter. He walked on water as long as his eyes were on Jesus. But the moment he looked at the wind, the moment his focus shifted to the storm, he started sinking. Not because the power disappeared, not because Jesus moved, but because his focus broke. That's how fragile breakthrough is. It's not just about believing, it's about staying fixed. And that's where so many people lose it. They start with faith. They start believing. They even see small victories. But then life hits, delays come. People disappoint. And little by little, their focus drifts until their faith dries up. Not because God failed, but because their focus failed. You've got to fight for your focus daily. You've got to protect your faith like it's treasure. Because it is. You don't let everyone speak into your spirit. You don't entertain every voice. You don't engage every battle. You keep your eyes fixed, your ears tuned, your heart guarded, because clear focus creates strong faith. And when your faith is strong, you speak differently. You walk differently. You expect differently. You don't panic when storms come. You command them to be still. You don't fear giants. You run toward them. You don't second guess your identity. You walk in authority. But now comes the next question. What happens when your faith is strong, but the problem still seems to be growing? Let's uncover that next, because you must learn how to stop empowering the problem and start empowering the promise. Don't empower the problem, empower the promise. Every time you speak in fear, every time you agree with doubt, every time you rehearse what's wrong, you're feeding the problem. You're giving it space. You're giving it voice. And anything you empower grows. That's the principle. The more attention you give it, the more influence it gains. But here's the thing. Problems don't need your permission to show up. They need your agreement to stay. And that's what many people are doing, unknowingly partnering with the problem instead of standing on the promise. You say, "This always happens to me." You say, "I don't think it's ever going to change." You say, "I'm just trying to survive." And what you're doing, without even realizing it, is reinforcing the very thing you're trying to escape. But listen, you were never called to agree with the enemy. You were called to agree with God. And God doesn't speak in fear. He speaks in faith. He doesn't magnify the mountain. He moves it. He doesn't confirm your weakness. He declares your strength. So the question is, which voice are you empowering? See, the promise of God is not weak. It's not passive. It's not optional. It's alive. It's active. It's sharp. But it can only work in you when you give it authority. That means you don't just read the word, you speak it. You don't just quote scripture, you stand on it. You don't just listen to sermons, you apply them. Because when the promise becomes your position, then the problem loses its power. Stop repeating what the enemy told you. Start declaring what God already promised you. Stop describing the valley. Start announcing the victory. You've got to flip the narrative. You've got to take back the mic. Don't let your emotions be the loudest voice in the room. Let the promise interrupt the problem. And don't just speak it when it's easy. Speak it when it's hard. Speak it when it hurts. Speak it when nothing looks like it's changing. Because faith doesn't wait for sight. Faith creates sight. And the more you empower the promise, the more you shift the atmosphere. Not just around you, but within you. Because here's the truth. The promise doesn't just change your situation. It transforms your posture. It reminds you of who you are. It ignites boldness. It silences fear. It activates divine momentum. So maybe the next miracle in your life isn't about praying harder. It's about believing louder. And that brings us to a supernatural key, because when you truly empower the promise, you realize something powerful. Heaven moves when earth believes. Heaven moves when earth believes. That's not just a phrase, it's a law, a spiritual principle that cannot be broken. Heaven responds to faith, not feelings. It's not your volume that moves God, it's your belief. You can cry, shout, scream, even beg. But until faith rises, the atmosphere doesn't shift, because faith is the currency of the kingdom. Faith is the language that heaven recognizes. When earth believes, heaven aligns. When a man or woman chooses to believe, really believe, not just in word, but in posture, in attitude, in expectation, something begins to shift. Doors, answers flow. Power is released. Why? Because belief gives God permission to move through you. Not because he needs it, but because he designed it that way. God gave man dominion on earth. That means heaven's intervention requires earth's agreement. Miracles are not magic, they are moments of alignment. When your spirit aligns with his will, when your words align with his word, when your heart aligns with his heart, heaven invades earth. And this is why the enemy fights your belief so aggressively. Because if he can kill your belief, he can block your breakthrough. He doesn't need to steal your destiny. He just needs you to stop believing in it. He wants you discouraged, disillusioned, distracted, so you let go of the promise just before it comes to pass. But when you hold on, when you believe beyond what you see, when you dare to trust in the dark what God told you in the light, heaven begins to move. Not because you earned it, but because you believed it. God responds to faith. Always has, always will. Remember the woman with the issue of blood. She didn't wait for Jesus to call her name. She believed, and then she moved. She said to herself, if I can just touch the hem of his garment, I will be healed. And because she believed, virtue flowed. Power moved. Heaven responded. That's the kind of belief that opens the heavens. Not passive faith, not borrowed faith, not secondhand belief, but personal, bold, radical trust in who God is and what he said. You've got to believe even when it doesn't make sense, even when the facts are loud, even when your feelings disagree, because faith is not based on evidence. It creates it. When you believe, you release. And once you understand this, you stop begging and start declaring. You stop hoping and start walking. You stop wondering if it will happen and start expecting it already has. So now comes the question, if heaven is already waiting for your belief, what's standing in the way? Let's confront that next, because your storm doesn't stop God's strategy. Your storm doesn't stop God's strategy. That storm you're in right now, that battle you didn't expect, that delay you didn't plan for, that betrayal that cut deep, it didn't surprise God. It didn't change his mind. It didn't cancel his purpose. The storm may have caught you off guard, but it didn't catch heaven off schedule, because God doesn't build his plan around your storm. He builds the storm into his plan. See, we think when storms come, something has gone wrong, but storms don't always mean you're out of alignment. Sometimes storms are confirmation that you're right where you're supposed to be. Jesus told the disciples, let's go to the other side. And then what happened? A storm. Not because they disobeyed, but because they obeyed. The storm wasn't a sign of absence. It was an announcement of purpose. But the problem is storms make us forget. We forget what God said. We forget who we are. We forget the promise. We forget that his strategy is bigger than what we feel in the moment. And when we forget, we panic, we freeze, we question. But faith doesn't look at the storm. Faith remembers the strategy. And here's the truth. The enemy sends storms to distract you, but God uses them to develop you. What you see as opposition, God sees as opportunity. That storm was not sent to break you, but to build you, to strengthen your roots, to awaken your authority, to reveal what's really inside of you. Because you never know what kind of faith you have until the wind starts blowing. Don't let the noise of the storm drown out the whisper of your assignment. Don't let temporary trouble pull you out of eternal purpose. Because storms don't cancel God's word. His plan remains. His strategy stands. His timing is still perfect. And He's not pacing the throne room, wondering how to fix your life. He's already authored the end from the beginning. So the next time the wind howls, the next time the waves rise, the next time your emotions shake, remind yourself, this storm does not change my assignment. This battle does not delete my promise. This pain does not cancel my prophecy, because God's strategy is secure. And when the storm is over, and it will be, you'll see that everything you lost wasn't wasted. It was used. Everything that shook you shaped you. Everything that scared you strengthened you. And what felt like an ending was actually just a beginning. Now is your moment to rise. Now is the time to shift your focus. Not on the storm, not on the problem, not on the fear, but on the power of God. Because when your eyes are fixed on Him, your faith becomes unshakable, your voice becomes unstoppable, and your future becomes undeniable. So don't bow to the storm. Speak to it. Walk through it. And come out stronger. Because your purpose is greater than your pain, and your power is greater than your problem.